Amsterdam, 1944. Winter is coming, and with it, the darkest days Holland has ever known. A young woman with striking red hair walks into a crowded bar where German officers are drinking, laughing, celebrating another day of occupation. The place reeks of cigarette smoke, cheap beer, and arrogance. These men think they own the world. For now, they do. She's beautiful, confident, maybe 23 years old, wearing a simple dress that doesn't draw too much attention, but enough to be noticed. An SS officer, sitting with his buddies, spots her immediately. She's alone. That's unusual. Women don't usually come to these places alone, not if they're smart. He watches her. She notices, and she smiles at him. Not too eager, not too shy, just enough. He smiles back, hook, line, and sinker. She walks over to his table. They talk. She asks about his day, where he's from, what brought him to Holland. She's charming, funny even. She touches his arm when she laughs, leans in close when he talks, makes him feel like he's the most interesting man in the room. The other officers at his table are jealous. He's won the prize for the night. His ego is through the roof. After half an hour of this, she leans in real close and whispers a question. "Would you like to take a walk? Just the two of us? Somewhere quieter?" The officer doesn't even think about it. Of course he wants to. He's been thinking about it since she walked in. He stands up, throws some money on the table for his drink, and follows her outside. The streets of Amsterdam are dark. There's a blackout, of course. No streetlights, no shop windows lit up, nothing that could guide Allied bombers to their targets. Perfect for what's about to happen. They walk together, her arm linked through his, heading toward the forest on the outskirts of town. He's talking about himself, bragging about his exploits, how many raids he's led, how many enemies of the Reich he's captured. She nods, smiles, pretends to be impressed. Inside, she's counting the steps, calculating the distance, listening for footsteps behind them. There are none. They're alone. Good. They reach the forest. The trees swallow them up, and the darkness is complete. The officer is getting more confident now, more aggressive. He reaches for her. She steps back, just slightly, and her hand goes into her coat pocket. He doesn't notice. He's too focused on what he thinks is about to happen. She stops walking, turns to face him, and before he can say another word, before he can even register what's happening, she pulls out an FN Browning pistol, aims it at his head, and shoots him dead. One bullet, right between the eyes. The sound echoes through the trees, sharp and final. He drops like a puppet with its strings cut. She stands there for a moment looking down at him, this man who thought he was going to have a pleasant evening. Then she tucks the pistol back into her pocket, turns, and walks away. Calm as you please, like nothing happened, like... She didn't just execute a Nazi officer in cold blood. Her name is Hannie Schaft. The Nazis don't know her name yet, but they will. They'll call her the girl with the red hair. And before this war is over, before Holland sees liberation, that red hair will become the most wanted target in all of Holland. More wanted than any resistance leader, more hunted than any spy. Because Hannie Schaft isn't just distributing pamphlets or hiding refugees, she's killing them, one Nazi at a time. And she's good at it. You see, the Nazis thought they had Holland locked down tight. They had the Wehrmacht patrolling every street. They had the Gestapo kicking in doors at 3 a.m. They had the SD infiltrating every organization, every church group, every neighborhood watch. They had collaborators, Dutch traitors, turning in their own neighbors for a handful of guilders. They thought resistance was just pamphlets and radio broadcasts, minor annoyances they could stamp out whenever they wanted. They were wrong, dead wrong. They didn't know about the young women who were hunting them, Women who looked innocent, harmless, unthreatening. Women who could walk into a bar full of SS officers and not raise a single eyebrow. Women who could smile, flirt, laugh at terrible jokes, and make a Nazi feel like the luckiest man alive, and then put a bullet in his brain before he even knew what hit him. These women were ghosts. They struck without warning and disappeared without a trace. And the Nazis had no idea how to stop them, because who suspects a 20-year-old girl on a bicycle? Who sees a young woman in a flower print dress as a threat? Nobody. That was their greatest weapon: invisibility. Hannie Schaft was one of those women, maybe the best of them, certainly the most famous, though she never wanted fame. And her story, well, it's the kind of story Hollywood couldn't make up if they tried, because this isn't some movie where the hero survives and rides off into the sunset with the love interest. This isn't Captain America punching Hitler. This is real. This is blood and death and moral compromise. This is what happened when ordinary people, people like you and me, people who just wanted to live their lives, decided they'd had enough. When they decided that some things are worth killing for, and some things are worth dying for. And Hannie Schaft did both. She killed for freedom, and she died for it. 3 weeks before she would have seen the liberation she fought for. 3 weeks. Remember that number? It's going to haunt you by the time we're done here. Now, before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you appreciate stories like this, real stories about real heroes who paid the ultimate price, hit that subscribe button right now. Because these stories matter. They matter more than ever. See, we're losing the generation that lived through this war. Every day, fewer and fewer of them are left, and pretty soon, maybe 10. 20 years from now, there won't be anyone left who remembers what it was really like. All we'll have are the stories, the written accounts, the documentaries, the videos like this one. And if we don't tell them, if we don't preserve them, if we don't pass them on to the next generation, then people like Hannie Schaft died for nothing. Their sacrifices will be forgotten. Their courage will fade into history books that nobody reads. So if you think it's important to remember what these people did, what they sacrificed, what they gave up so we could be free, then subscribe. Hit that button. Help me keep these stories alive, because once they're gone forever. All right, let's get back to it. Hannie Schaft wasn't born to be a killer. Nobody is. That's not how it works. You're not born with the ability to look someone in the eyes and pull a trigger. That's something you learn, something that gets forced on you by circumstances beyond your control. And believe me, if Hannie could have changed the world any other way, she would have. She was born Jannetje Johanna Schaft on September 16, 1920, in the city of Haarlem, Netherlands. Beautiful city, historic, full of culture and art and everything that makes life worth living. Her parents were decent middle-class folks, salt-of-the-earth types. Her father, Peter, was a schoolteacher, patient man, kind, the type who believed education could solve any problem. Her mother, Afje, managed the household, kept everything running smoothly. They weren't rich, but they weren't poor either. Comfortable, secure. They raised Hannie to be smart, to be kind, to use her mind. And boy, did she. The girl was brilliant. Not just smart, brilliant. She excelled in every subject. Mathematics, literature, history, languages. She loved learning the way some kids love sports or music. She devoured books, stayed up late reading by candlelight. Her parents would find her asleep with a book on her chest. She had this fierce intelligence, this insatiable curiosity about the world, and she wanted to make it better. She believed, really believed, that one person could make a difference. That if you just worked hard enough, cared enough, fought hard enough with words and laws and reason, you could change things. She wanted to be a lawyer, not just any lawyer, mind you. She didn't want to write contracts or settle property disputes. She wanted to specialize in human rights. She wanted to defend the defenseless, speak for those who had no voice, protect the vulnerable from those who would exploit them. That was Hannie, idealistic to her core, passionate, convinced she could change the world with the law, with justice, with the power of a well-argued case in front of an impartial judge. Sweet, isn't it? That kind of innocence, that kind of faith in the system. She believed in it completely. She enrolled at the University of Amsterdam in 1938 to study law. She was 18 years old, full of hope, full of plans. She had her whole life mapped out. Get her law degree, specialize in human rights, maybe work for the League of Nations, defend victims of oppression around the world. She had her whole life ahead of her. Decades of making a difference, of fighting injustice the right way, the civilized way, through courts and laws and legal precedent. That's what she thought. That's what she believed. And then the Nazis came, and all those plans, all that hope, all that faith in civilization and law and justice, it all turned to ash in 5 days. Then the Nazis came, and everything Hannie believed in, everything she'd planned for, everything she thought she knew about the world, it all came crashing down. May 10th, 1940, 4:30 in the morning. Most people in Holland were still asleep. Then they heard the planes. Hundreds of them. German bombers and fighters filling the sky like locusts. The invasion had begun. No declaration of war, no warning, no chance to prepare. Germany invaded the Netherlands without provocation, without justification, without mercy. The Dutch army fought back hard. God, they fought hard. Brave men, good men, defending their homeland against overwhelming odds. But they were outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered 10-1. They had bicycles and rifles. The Germans had tanks and dive bombers and artillery that could level a city block in minutes. The Dutch held out for 5 days. 5 days of brutal, desperate fighting. The Germans were losing men, losing time, getting frustrated. So they decided to make an example. May 14th, 1940, Rotterdam, beautiful city, second largest in Holland. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, bombed it into rubble. Not military targets, not strategic installations, the city center, civilian neighborhoods, homes, shops, schools, hospitals. They destroyed 900 acres in 15 minutes, killed over 800 civilians, men, women, children, elderly. Didn't matter. The message was clear. Crystal clear. Surrender. Or we'll do this to every city in Holland. Amsterdam next, then The Hague, then Utrecht. We'll burn your whole country to the ground. The Dutch government surrendered. They had no choice. What else could they do? Watch every city in Holland get turned into ash? Queen Wilhelmina and the government fled to London. The occupation began, and everything changed. Everything. German soldiers filled the streets overnight, thousands of them. Wehrmacht troops in their gray-green uniforms, marching in formation, their jackboots echoing off the cobblestones. Swastikas hung from every building, every government office, every town hall, every police station. The flag of occupation, the symbol of defeat. New laws came fast. Lightning fast. Jews had to register with the authorities. Give your name, your address, your occupation, your entire family history. Why? Don't ask questions. Just do it. Then Jews couldn't own businesses anymore. The Germans seized them, handed them over to Dutch collaborators. Then Jews had to wear yellow stars, 6-pointed stars sewn onto their clothes so everyone could see who they were, mark them out, identify them for what was coming next. Then Jews couldn't go to parks. couldn't go to theaters, couldn't go to restaurants or cafes or public swimming pools, couldn't take the train, couldn't ride a bicycle, couldn't be outside after 8 p.m. Step by step, inch by inch, they were being erased from public life, isolated, cornered, trapped. The Gestapo set up shop, the Geheime Staatspolizei, the secret state police. These weren't soldiers, these were hunters. They arrested anyone who spoke out against the occupation, anyone who refused to cooperate, anyone suspected of helping Jews or hiding resistance members. They'd come in the middle of the night, bang on your door with rifle butts, drag you out of bed in front of your children. You'd never see your family again. The SD, the Sicherheitsdienst, the Nazi intelligence service was even worse. They infiltrated every organization, every church group, every social club, every neighborhood watch. They had informants everywhere. You couldn't trust anyone. Your neighbor might be SD, your co-worker, your friend. One wrong word, and you'd disappear. And then there were the collaborators, Dutch citizens who sold out their own people for Nazi money. These were the worst, traitors to their own country, their own neighbors, their own blood. They turned in Jews for bounties, 7.5 guilders per Jew. That's what a human life was worth, less than $10. They joined the Dutch SS, wore German uniforms, helped round up their own countrymen for deportation. They worked for the SD, spied on resistance groups, set traps for patriots trying to fight back. Every country that got occupied had collaborators, but the Dutch ones, they were particularly enthusiastic, particularly cruel. It happened fast, too fast. One day you're living your life, going to university, studying law, planning your future. The next day your country isn't yours anymore. Everything you knew, everything you trusted, everything you believed in, gone. Just like that. In 5 days. Hannie was 19 years old when the occupation began. She kept going to university, kept studying, kept believing that law and justice would prevail somehow, that this was temporary, that the world would come to its senses, that international law, treaties, civilized nations, they'd all step in and fix this nightmare. She kept her head down, kept studying, kept hoping, but hope doesn't stop jackboots. Hope doesn't save lives. And Hannie was about to learn that the hard way. In 1941, the Nazis implemented a new policy at all Dutch universities. Every student had to sign a loyalty oath, a declaration of allegiance to the German Reich and to Adolf Hitler personally. It was a simple piece of paper, just your signature. That's all. Sign it and you could continue your education, get your degree, build your career, live your life. Don't sign it, and you were expelled immediately. No second chances, no appeals. You were done. Most students signed it. I mean, what choice did they have, right? They'd worked so hard to get into university, spent years studying. Their whole future depended on that degree. Their families had sacrificed to send them there. How could they throw it all away over a signature? It didn't mean anything, really, just words on paper. It didn't change who you were inside. That's what they told themselves. That's how they justified it. And you know what? I'm not going to judge them for it. I wasn't there. I didn't have to make that choice. Nobody in this generation has. We don't know what we would have done. It's easy to say you'd refuse, that you'd stand on principle, that you'd sacrifice your future for your beliefs. It's a lot harder to actually do it. But Hannie refused. She looked at that paper and said, no, not a chance. I will not pledge loyalty to people who are destroying my country, who are rounding up my Jewish friends, who are turning Holland into a prison. I will not sign my name to that. I will not collaborate, not even on paper, not even symbolically. No, they expelled her. Just like that, her dream of becoming a lawyer was over, her future gone. She was 21 years old and she had nothing. No degree, no career, no prospects. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd planned, wiped out because she wouldn't sign a piece of paper. But she had something else. She had a choice. She could go home, stay quiet, keep her head down, wait for the war to end, hope that someday, somehow, things would go back to normal. Or she could fight back. She could do something, she could resist, she could make them pay for what they'd done, for what they were doing every single day to her country, to her friends, to innocent people whose only crime was being born Jewish. Hannie chose to fight. She didn't join the resistance right away. It wasn't that simple. You didn't just walk into an office and sign up. There was no recruitment center, no application form. The Dutch resistance was a network of small, secret cells operating independently, never knowing who else was involved, never sharing more information than absolutely necessary. Trust was everything. One wrong person, one collaborator, one Gestapo informant, and everyone dies. The whole cell gets rounded up, tortured, executed. So you had to be careful. You had to be invited. Someone had to vouch for you, stake their life on your loyalty. And even then, you started small. Prove yourself. Show you could keep your mouth shut. Show you wouldn't break under pressure. Hannie started small, distributing underground newspapers, pamphlets that told the truth about what was happening, that countered Nazi propaganda. She'd take stacks of them, hide them in her coat, ride her bicycle through the city, dropping them in mailboxes, leaving them on park benches, slipping them into library books. Dangerous work, absolutely. If she got caught, she'd be arrested, probably executed. But it was something. It was resistance. It was refusing to accept the occupation passively. She helped Jewish families hide. The deportations had started. The Nazis were rounding up Jews, loading them onto trains, shipping them east. To labor camps, they said, for resettlement. Nobody knew yet about the death camps, about the gas chambers, about the systematic murder of 6 million people. But everyone knew the deportations were bad, that families were being torn apart, that people were disappearing and never coming back. So the resistance helped Jews go underground, hide in attics, basements, hidden rooms, false identity papers, new names, new lives. And someone had to coordinate all of that, find safe houses, forge documents, smuggle children across the border to neutral countries. Hannie did all of it. She forged identity papers, getting better and better at mimicking official stamps and signatures. She found safe houses, convincing sympathetic Dutch families to take the risk of hiding Jews. She smuggled children out of Amsterdam, walking them to the countryside in the middle of the night, handing them off to the next link in the chain that would eventually get them to Switzerland or Sweden. Dangerous work, life or death work, but not violent, not yet. That came later. In 1943, Hannie met two sisters who would change her life forever, Freddie and Truus Oversteegen. You might have heard of them. If you haven't, you should look them up. These two women were legends in the Dutch resistance, absolute legends. They were younger than Hannie. Freddie was just a kid when she started, maybe 14, 15 years old. Truus was a couple years older. But don't let their age fool you. Don't let the fact that they were girls fool you either. These girls were stone-cold killers. They specialized in what the resistance called liquidations, a polite word for assassination, murder, execution, targeted hits on high-value Nazi officers and Dutch collaborators. They'd seduce German soldiers, lure them into the woods, and execute them with a bullet to the head. Then they'd ride away on their bicycles like nothing happened. Just two girls on a bike ride. Nothing to see here. They were good at it, real good. They'd been doing it for years by the time Hannie met them. They had a system, techniques that worked, patterns they'd perfected through trial and error. But the resistance was growing. The missions were getting more dangerous, more complex. And they needed help. They needed someone smart, someone fearless, someone who wouldn't break under pressure, someone who could keep their mouth shut even under torture. They needed Hannie Schaft. Frans van der Wiel was the commander of the Haarlem Council of Resistance, part of the underground network fighting the Nazi occupation. He was the one who approached Hannie. He'd been watching her for months, seeing how she handled herself under stress, how she kept her mouth shut when the Gestapo came sniffing around after a sabotage operation. She was good, reliable, cool under pressure. But could she handle more? Could she handle killing? That was the question, because distributing pamphlets is one thing, forging documents is one thing, but looking someone in the eyes and pulling the trigger, ending their life, watching them die because of you, that's something else entirely. Not everyone can do it. Most people can't. So Frans van der Wiel needed to know. Could Hannie Schaft kill? He tested her. He came to her apartment one afternoon with a proposition. "There's a Nazi officer," he said. "SS, high-ranking, responsible for dozens of deportations. He needs to be liquidated. Are you willing?" Hannie said yes. She didn't hesitate. She knew what she was signing up for, what it meant, what it would cost her. But she said yes. "Good," van der Wiel said. "He's across the street right now. I'll give you a gun. Go shoot him." He handed her an FN Browning pistol. Standard issue for resistance fighters. Belgian-made, 9mm, reliable, accurate. Small enough to conceal in a coat pocket or handbag. She'd never held one before, never fired a gun in her life. Her hands were shaking, but she took it. She checked to make sure it was loaded. It was. Or at least, it looked like it was. She crossed the street, approached the officer, raised the pistol, aimed at his chest, and pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. The gun wasn't loaded. It had been a test. The whole thing was a test. The Nazi officer pulled off his coat and revealed himself to be Frans van der Wiel. He'd dressed up in a German uniform, played the part, wanted to see if she'd actually do it, if she'd actually pull the trigger on a human being, and she had. She'd passed the test. "Welcome to the resistance," he said. "Now let's teach you how to shoot for real." They took her to an underground training facility, a hidden basement beneath a flower shop in Haarlem. You'd never know it was there. From the street level, it just looked like a normal shop selling tulips and roses. But underneath, beneath a trap door covered by a rug, there was a whole operation. Storage for weapons, a printing press for forged documents, and a makeshift shooting range where resistance fighters learned to use firearms. There, in the darkness beneath the earth, lit by a few kerosene lamps, they taught Hannie how to kill. They taught her how to use the FN Browning pistol, her primary weapon, how to load it, how to clear a jam, how to aim, how to control her breathing, how to squeeze the trigger smoothly instead of jerking it. They taught her about the Sten gun, a British submachine gun that was being dropped to resistance groups across Europe. Lightweight, simple, made from stamped metal parts. It looked like something you'd build in a garage. But it was effective. Perfect for ambushes and sabotage operations. Fully automatic. 9mm rounds, same as the Browning. 32-round magazine. You could lay down a lot of fire real quick with a Sten gun. They taught her how to field strip both weapons, clean them, reassemble them in the dark, how to carry them concealed, how to draw quickly, how to shoot from different positions, standing, kneeling, prone, moving, how to shoot with both hands in case one got injured. They taught her how to stay calm when everything inside you is screaming, how to control your breathing, your heart rate, your fear, how to function when the adrenaline hits and your hands start shaking and your vision narrows and every instinct is telling you to run. And they taught her how to kill, how to aim for center mass, the chest, the biggest target, how to double tap, 2 shots rapid fire to make sure your target goes down, how to headshot when you need a guaranteed kill, how to move after shooting, never stay in one place, how to escape, how to blend into a crowd, how to disappear. And most importantly, they taught her how to live with it, because that's the thing nobody talks about. Killing someone changes you. It doesn't matter if they're a Nazi. Doesn't matter if they deserve it. Doesn't matter if it's war and you're fighting for your country, and everything you're doing is justified. When you look someone in the eyes and pull the trigger, when you watch the life leave their body, when you see them fall and know it's because of you, part of you dies with them, every single time. Hannie learned that lesson real quick. Her first real mission, not a test, not practice, but an actual assassination, came in the fall of 1943. The target was a Dutch collaborator named Hendrik Seinstra. This guy was a traitor of the worst kind. He worked for the Gestapo as an informant, turned in Jewish families hiding in Amsterdam, turned in resistance members he suspected. Anyone who opposed the Nazis, anyone who didn't show enough enthusiasm for the occupation, he'd report them. He was directly responsible for dozens of arrests, deportations, executions. The resistance had been watching him for months, gathering intelligence, confirming his identity, documenting his activities, building a case, basically, though there would be no trial. The verdict was already decided. Death, and Hannie got the assignment. She found him one evening walking home from his favorite bar. He was alone, which was unusual for collaborators. Most of them traveled in groups or with German protection because they knew how hated they were. But Seinstra was arrogant, thought he was untouchable, thought his Gestapo connections would keep him safe. He was wrong. Hannie approached him on a dark street. She was dressed plainly, nothing that would stand out, just another woman walking home. She got close, within a few meters. He didn't even look at her. Why would he? She was just a woman, harmless, insignificant. He kept walking. She pulled the FN Browning from her coat pocket, aimed at the back of his head, and fired. 1 shot. He dropped. She kept walking, didn't run, didn't panic, didn't look back, just walked away like nothing happened. By the time anyone found the body, she was back home, cleaning the gun, already thinking about the next mission. But that night, she couldn't sleep. She kept seeing his face, or what was left of it. The moment the bullet hit, the way he fell, the blood. God, there was so much blood. She'd killed a man, ended his life. Yes, he was a traitor. Yes, he was responsible for deaths, probably dozens of deaths. Yes, he deserved it. But she'd still killed him, pulled the trigger, watched him die. That weighs on you. It doesn't matter how justified it is. It weighs on you. She thought about going to Franz van der Wiel, telling him she couldn't do it again. That one was enough. But then she thought about the families Seinstra had turned in, the Jews deported because of him, the resistance members tortured and executed, and she realized something. If she didn't kill people like him, who would? Who else could get close enough? A man would be suspicious, noticed, stopped. But a woman? A young woman with red hair and a pretty smile? She could walk right up to them. That was her weapon, her greatest advantage, and she couldn't waste it. So she didn't quit. She kept going, and over the next year and a half, Hannie Schaft became one of the most active, most effective resistance fighters in all of Holland. She became part of the team with Freddy and Truus Oversteegen. The three of them were unstoppable. They developed techniques, strategies, patterns that worked, methods they could repeat with consistent success. The forest ambush. One of them, usually Hannie because of her red hair and striking looks, would go to a bar or tavern where German officers gathered. Wehrmacht officers, SS officers, Gestapo agents. These places were all over Amsterdam and Haarlem. The Germans felt safe there, surrounded by their fellow soldiers, protected by armed guards at the doors. They'd drink, play cards, sing drinking songs, talk about the war, brag about their exploits. Hannie would walk in alone. Every head would turn. A beautiful young woman, unescorted, in a bar full of German soldiers? That didn't happen often. She'd make eye contact with one of them, smile, sit nearby. He'd approach. They always did. Couldn't help themselves. "What's a pretty girl like you doing here?" She'd have a story ready. "I was supposed to meet my friend, but she didn't show up. I should probably go, but he'd insist she stay. Have a drink with me. Tell me about yourself." So she would. She'd tell him about her life, or a fictional version of it anyway. She was a secretary, or a shop girl, or a student before the war. She'd ask about him. Where was he from? Did he have family back in Germany? What did he do before the war? She'd listen, nod, laugh at his jokes even when they weren't funny. Touch his arm, lean in close, make him feel special, important, like he was the only man in the room. After an hour or so of this, she'd lean in real close and whisper, "It's so loud in here. Would you like to take a walk? Just the two of us? Somewhere quieter where we can talk?" The officer would agree immediately, every single time, without fail. They'd leave together, his arm around her waist, walking out into the dark streets of occupied Holland. They'd walk toward the forest on the outskirts of the city. She'd suggest it. "Such a beautiful night. Let's go see the stars, away from all the city lights." He'd agree. They'd walk deeper and deeper into the trees, away from the roads, away from witnesses, away from help. And there, hidden among the trees in a predetermined location, Freddy or Truus would be waiting with a Sten gun or a Browning pistol, or sometimes both. One shot to the head. The officer would fall, dead before he hit the ground. They'd already have a grave dug, hidden by branches and leaves. They'd roll the body in, cover it up, scatter leaves and debris over it. Then they'd walk away, get on their bicycles, ride home. Just three girls out for an evening ride. Nothing unusual. Nobody would find the body for days, sometimes weeks. And by then, the resistance was long gone. No witnesses, no evidence. Just another missing German soldier, another name on the casualty list. Eventually, the Germans stopped investigating. There were too many. They couldn't keep up. The bicycle assassination. This one was simpler, faster, riskier. Truus would pedal the bicycle. Hannie would sit on the back, weapon ready, usually the FN Browning pistol. They'd identify their target ahead of time. A German officer, a Gestapo agent, an SD operative, a Dutch collaborator. They'd learn his routine, where he lived, where he worked, what route he took, what time he left in the morning, what time he came home at night. Then they'd wait for him. Truus would pedal casually, like they were just out for a ride. They'd approach, the target from behind. Get close, and Hannie would fire. One shot, maybe two. Keep riding. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just two women on a bicycle. By the time anyone realized what happened, they'd be blocks away, turning corners, disappearing into the maze of city streets, blending into the crowds. They executed dozens of targets this way. Nazi officers who were organizing deportations, Gestapo agents, who were hunting resistance members, SD operatives who were running informant networks, Dutch collaborators who were turning in their neighbors, anyone who was helping the Nazis, anyone who was hunting Jews, anyone who was betraying Holland. The resistance kept a list, a long list, names, addresses, descriptions, daily routines, and Hannie Schaft was working her way down it, one bullet at a time. But here's the thing about Hannie. She wasn't some mindless killing machine. She wasn't a sociopath who enjoyed it. She wasn't cold or cruel or sadistic. She had rules. She had lines she wouldn't cross. And that set her apart from a lot of people in the resistance who were getting more and more brutal as the war dragged on and the occupation got worse. In the winter of 1943-1944, the resistance leadership came to her with an order, a mission. The target was Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the Reich Commissioner of the Netherlands, the highest-ranking Nazi in the country, the man in charge of the entire occupation, a monster directly responsible for the deportation of over 100,000 Dutch Jews to concentration camps, for mass executions of resistance members, for the starvation and suffering of the entire Dutch population. If anyone deserved to die, it was him. But the mission wasn't to kill him. That would be too difficult, too risky. He was too well guarded, surrounded by SS bodyguards 24/7. You'd never get close enough. So the plan was different. The plan was to kidnap his children, use them as leverage to force him to release hundreds of resistance, prisoners who were scheduled for execution. And if he refused, if he called their bluff, then they'd execute the children. Kill them. 2 kids, young kids, had nothing to do with the war. But that was the plan. That was the order. Hannie, Freddie, and Truus refused the mission. Flat out refused. Not a chance. "We don't kill children," Hannie said. "I don't care whose children they are. I don't care what their father has done. We don't murder innocents." That's the line. That's the difference between us and the Nazis. If we cross that line, if we start killing children, then what are we even fighting for? What makes us any better than them? The resistance leadership pushed back. Those prisoners are going to die, hundreds of them. Their lives are worth more than 2 Nazi kids. But Hannie wouldn't budge. Neither would Freddie or Truus. "We've killed plenty of people," she said. "We've liquidated Nazis, executed collaborators. We'll keep doing it. But we won't kill children. Never. Find another way." That decision cost them. Some members of the resistance called them soft, said they didn't have the stomach for real war, said they were letting their emotions get in the way of strategy. But Hannie didn't care. She'd killed, by that point, at least 20 people, maybe more. She'd done everything the resistance asked of her. But she wouldn't kill children. That was the line she wouldn't cross. And years later, when someone asked her about it, she said the same thing Truus Oversteegen said. "We were cutting out cancerous tumors from society. We had to. But we weren't the cancer. We had to stay human. That's what separated us from them." Now, you're probably about an hour into this story, and I want to pause for just a second. If you're still here, if you're still listening, that means this story matters to you. That means you understand why we need to remember people like Hannie Schaft. So, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more people find this video, which means more people learn about Hannie and the sacrifices she made. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your dad, your grandfather, a friend who loves history. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now. Because there are more stories like this. Stories that deserve to be told. Stories about real people who made real sacrifices. Stories that Hollywood will never tell because they're too complex, too morally ambiguous, too real. And I'm going to keep telling them as long as you keep listening. All right, Let's keep going. By 1944, Hannie Schaft was one of the most active resistance fighters in Holland. She wasn't just doing assassinations anymore, she was running sabotage operations, infiltrating Nazi facilities, gathering intelligence on German troop movements and passing it to Allied forces, coordinating with other resistance cells across the country, organizing weapons drops from British planes, training new recruits. She was everywhere, doing everything. And that was becoming a problem, because the more you do, the more visible you become. And the Nazis were starting to notice. They didn't know her name. Not yet. But they knew about the girl with the red hair. Witnesses had started reporting her. A young woman with distinctive red hair, seen near multiple assassination sites, different locations, different dates, but always the same description. Red hair, early 20s, attractive, alone or with one other woman. The Gestapo put out a bulletin. Find the girl with the red hair. Bring her in alive. We need to know who she's working with, what cells she's connected to, how the resistance is organized. She's the key. Find her. Hannie knew she was being hunted, so she did the obvious thing. She dyed her hair black, cut it short, changed the style, started wearing glasses even though her eyesight was fine, changed her wardrobe, her mannerisms, the way she walked, changed everything she could without changing her face. And it worked. For a while. The girl with the red hair disappeared. The assassination stopped matching that description. The Nazis were confused. Had she fled the country? Been killed in an operation gone wrong? They didn't know. And that bought Hannie time. Time to keep fighting, time to keep killing, time to save more lives. But the pressure was building. The occupation was getting worse, way worse. By late 1944, Germany was losing the war badly. The Allies had landed at Normandy in June. France was liberated. The Russians were pushing from the east, steamrolling through Poland, heading toward Berlin. The Germans were retreating on all fronts. Everyone knew the war was almost over. Liberation was coming. It was just a matter of time. But that made the Nazis more dangerous, not less. Because cornered animals fight the hardest. And the Nazis were definitely cornered. They cracked down hard on the resistance. Mass arrests, public executions as warnings, collective punishment. If they couldn't find the resistance fighters responsible for an attack, they'd just round up civilians and shoot them. 10 civilians for every German soldier killed, sometimes more. They'd hang them in public squares, leave the bodies there for days as a warning. Join the resistance and this is what happens to your neighbors. They burned entire neighborhoods suspected of harboring resistance members, deported whole villages, sealed off cities, didn't let anyone in or out, searched every building, every basement, every attic. The occupation, which had been brutal from the start, became absolutely hellish in those final months. Because the Nazis knew they were losing, and they wanted to inflict as much pain as possible before they went down. And then came the Hunger Winter. Dear God, the Hunger Winter. If you don't know about this, you need to. It's one of the worst atrocities of the entire war, and most people have never heard of it. In September 1944, the Dutch government in exile in London called for a national railway strike. Stop the trains, they said. Prevent the Germans from moving troops and supplies. Help the Allied advance. The Dutch railway workers responded immediately. 30,000 of them went on strike. Just stopped showing up. The railway system shut down overnight. No trains running, no supplies moving. It was a major blow to the German war effort, and the Nazis were furious. So they decided to punish the entire Western Holland, cut off all food supplies, all of it. No food coming in by rail, by road, by canal, nothing. The western provinces, the most densely populated part of Holland, were starved. Deliberately, systematically, 4.5 million people, cut off from food in the winter, with no heating fuel either, so people froze while they starved. It started in October. By November, people were eating tulip bulbs. By December, they were eating boiled grass, tree bark, leather shoes, wallpaper paste. Anything. The calorie ration dropped to 400 calories per day. That's starvation. That's death. People dropped dead in the streets. 22,000 Dutch civilians died that winter, died of starvation and cold. In Europe, in the 20th century, in a modern country. The Nazis did that, not as collateral damage, not as an accident, deliberately. As punishment. Hannie lived through the hunger winter. She was in Haarlem, right in the middle of it. She was starving like everyone else, but she kept fighting. She smuggled food to Jewish families in hiding, families who couldn't even go outside to search for scraps. She sabotaged German food warehouses, burned their supplies so they couldn't hoard them. She liquidated collaborators who were hoarding food and selling it on the black market for inflated prices, profiting off starvation. She never stopped, even when she was so weak from hunger she could barely stand. Even when every step was agony, she kept fighting, because what else was there to do? Give up? Let them win? Nada on chance. In early 1945, the end was in sight. Everyone knew it. The Allies were at the German border, the Russians were in Eastern Europe, Berlin was about to fall. It was just a matter of weeks, maybe days. Just hold on. Just survive a little longer. Liberation is coming. But that's when things went catastrophically wrong for Hannie. Because of one mistake, one tiny mistake that cost her everything. She was working with a resistance fighter named Jan Boonkamp. Good guy, brave, reliable. Been fighting since the beginning. They got an assignment in February 1945 to liquidate a Dutch collaborator named Willem Ragu. This guy was bad news. He worked for the SD, the Nazi intelligence service. He'd personally turned in dozens of resistance members, dozens of Jewish families. He had blood on his hands. Lots of it. He needed to go. So Hannie and Jan tracked him down. They found him on a street in Haarlem. It was daylight, which was unusual. Most liquidations happened at night or in secluded areas. But they didn't have a choice. This was their chance. Jan took the shot with his Browning pistol, hit Ragu in the chest, but didn't kill him immediately. Ragu screamed, fell, but kept screaming. People came running, civilians, German soldiers, Dutch police. It turned into chaos. In the confusion, a Dutch policeman working with the Nazis opened fire. He had a Sten gun, fully automatic, sprayed the area, hit John in the stomach. Terrible wound, catastrophic. Jan went down. Hannie wanted to help him, to drag him to safety, to get him to a doctor. But Jan screamed at her, "Go, run, get out of here. If they catch you, everyone dies. All your contacts, all your operations, everyone you've ever worked with. They'll torture it out of you. Go!" She ran. She had no choice. Left him bleeding in the street. Left him to be captured. It was the right decision tactically. The only decision. But it haunted her. For the rest of her very short life, it haunted her. The Germans took Jan to a hospital. He was dying, bleeding out internally. The doctors said he had hours, maybe a day at most. The Nazis knew he was resistance. They needed information, names, addresses, cells, contacts, everything. But Jan wouldn't talk. Even dying, even in agony, he wouldn't give up a single name. They tortured him. Didn't matter. He wouldn't break. So they tried something else. A Gestapo agent dressed up as a resistance member came into Jan's hospital room pretending to be there to help. "I'm with the network," he said. "I'm here to coordinate your escape, but I need information. Where should we send help? Who needs to be warned?" Jan, delirious from blood loss and morphine, believed him. He gave up one piece of information. Not names, not cells, just one address. Hannie's parents' house in Harlem. He thought he was helping, thought he was sending aid. He died a few hours later, never knowing what he'd done. The Nazis raided the house immediately, kicked in the door, tore the place apart looking for Hannie. But she wasn't there. She'd been living underground for months, never staying in one place for more than a few nights. Too dangerous, too many people looking for her. But they found her parents, Peter and Hannie Schaft, arrested them on the spot. Her father, the gentle schoolteacher who believed in education and reason. Her mother, who'd raised her to be kind and smart. Both in their 60s. They'd never hurt anyone in their lives. The Nazis arrested them anyway. They took them to a concentration camp, WWII in southern Holland. Terrible place. They interrogated them, tortured them, tried to use them as bait to draw Hannie out. "Where's your daughter? When did you last see her? Who is she working with?" Her parents didn't know, honestly didn't know. Hannie had kept them in the dark precisely for this reason. What you don't know, you can't be forced to tell. But the Nazis didn't believe them, so they kept them locked up, starved them, beat them, used them as leverage. Hannie found out her parents had been arrested. It destroyed her, absolutely destroyed her. Knowing they were in a concentration camp, suffering, starving, being tortured, because of her, because of what she'd done, because she'd fought back, and she couldn't do anything about it. If she turned herself in, everyone she'd ever worked with would die. Every cell she'd been in contact with would be compromised. Dozens, maybe hundreds of resistance members. All the Jewish families she'd helped hide, all the operations in progress. Everything. She had to let her parents suffer. She had to stay hidden. That was the price. Can you imagine that? Knowing your parents are being tortured, starving in a camp, and you can't do anything about it? You can't save them. You can't even send a message. You just have to hope they survive. Hope they're strong enough. Hope liberation comes before they die. That's what Hannie lived with. That's the price she paid for fighting. She went completely underground after that. No more missions, no more assassinations. She was too visible, too hunted. The girl with the red hair, even with black hair now, even with glasses and a changed appearance, was the most wanted person in Holland. The Gestapo had her parents. They had her description. They had her approximate age. They were closing in. She had to disappear completely. She hid in attics, basements, hidden rooms behind false walls, safe houses run by sympathetic Dutch families who were risking their lives to shelter her. She barely ate. There wasn't much food anyway. The hunger winter was still going on. She barely slept. Nightmares every time she closed her eyes. Every year later, when they interviewed survivors, they all said the same thing. The waiting was the worst part. Waiting for liberation, waiting for it to end, knowing it was almost over, but not knowing if you'd survive to see it. The Allies were coming. Everyone knew it. The British and Canadians were pushing into northern Holland. The Americans were crossing the Rhine into Germany. The Russians were in Berlin, street by street, house by house, fighting their way to Hitler's bunker. It was over. The war was over. Everyone knew it. Even the Germans. It was just a matter of time, weeks, maybe days. Just hold on. Just survive. March 21st, 1945. Liberation was 7 weeks away. 7 weeks. Hannie made a mistake, a small mistake, a stupid mistake, one that cost her everything. She needed to deliver copies of an illegal communist newspaper to a contact in Harlem. Stupid mission, unnecessary. The war was almost over. She should have stayed hidden, but the resistance needed her. One more mission, just one more. After everything she'd done, after all the risks she'd taken, how could she say no to one more mission? She put the newspapers in her bag, along with her FN Browning pistol, just in case. Always carry your weapon. That was the rule. Never go anywhere unarmed. She got on her bicycle and started riding through Harlem toward the meeting point. It was a route she'd taken 100 times before. She knew every street, every alley, every escape route. But this time, there was a checkpoint. Random Nazi checkpoint. They'd been setting them up all over in those final weeks. Desperate, paranoid, checking everyone. She came around a corner and there it was. German soldiers, barricades, no way around it. She couldn't turn back. That would look suspicious. So she kept riding, straight toward them. They stopped her. Young woman on a bicycle. Search her bag. Standard procedure. They were searching everyone. She handed over her bag, calm, confident, not showing any fear. They opened it, found the newspapers, illegal communist newspapers calling for resistance, for liberation, for the destruction of the Nazi occupation. They kept searching, found the pistol, the FN Browning, loaded, ready to fire. She was arrested on the spot. They knew they'd caught someone. Important. A young woman carrying a loaded pistol and illegal newspapers? This wasn't just some random girl. This was resistance. They took her to a prison in Amsterdam, locked her in a cell. And the interrogations began. They questioned her for days. Who are you? What's your name? Who are you working with? What cell? Who's your commander? What operations have you been involved in? She gave them nothing. Not her real name, not her contacts, not her operations. Nothing. They tortured her, beat her, kept her in solitary confinement. No food, no light, no sleep. Days blurred together. She lost track of time. But she didn't break, didn't give up a single name. But they kept investigating. They were convinced she was someone important. Her mannerisms, her confidence, the way she handled interrogation. This wasn't her first time. She was trained, experienced. Who was she? They went through their wanted lists, descriptions of known resistance members, and someone noticed something. Her hair was black, but her roots were growing in. Red roots. The dye was fading. And underneath the black, her natural color was showing. Red. The girl with the red hair. They'd found her. After years of hunting, after hundreds of man-hours, after all the bulletins and raids and investigations, they'd finally caught her. They were ecstatic. This was a prize, a trophy, the most wanted resistance fighter in Holland, and they had her. They confronted her with it. We know who you are, the girl with the red hair. Hannie Schaft. Admit it. She didn't deny it. What was the point? They had her. It was over. So she admitted to some of her actions. She confessed to assassinations, told them about Nazi officers she'd liquidated, collaborators she'd executed, sabotage operations she'd run. But she never gave up a single name, not one person. She protected everyone. Every member of her cell, every resistance fighter she'd worked with, every family she'd helped hide. She knew what they'd do to her, knew she was going to die, but she wasn't going to take anyone else with her. That's courage, real courage. Not the Hollywood kind where the hero fights their way out, the kind where you suffer alone so others can live, where you endure torture, knowing you're going to die and you still don't break. That's what Hannie Schaft did. She protected her friends until the very end. April 17th, 1945. 21 days before Holland would be liberated. 3 weeks. That's all. 3 weeks, and the war would be over. The Allies were at the gates. Everyone knew it. German forces were collapsing, surrendering in huge numbers. The fighting was almost done. There was even an agreement between the Nazis and the Dutch resistance to stop executions. A ceasefire, no more killing. Wait for the Allies. Let it end peacefully. Everyone agreed. Everyone except one man. His name was Wilhelm August Lagus. Everyone called him Willy Lagus. He was the head of the SD in Amsterdam, one of the most brutal, sadistic Nazis in Holland. He'd personally ordered the deaths of thousands of people. Jews, resistance members, civilians, didn't matter. If you opposed the Reich, he killed you. And now the war was ending. He was going to lose. He'd spend the rest of his life in prison, if he wasn't executed first. But before that happened, he wanted his trophy kill. He wanted Hannie Schaft dead. He didn't care about the ceasefire agreement. Didn't care that the war was over. Didn't care that in 3 weeks none of this would matter. He wanted the girl with the red hair dead. So he gave the order. Execute her. 2 Dutch collaborators were assigned as executioners. Not German soldiers. Dutchmen. Dutch citizens who'd betrayed their own country. Their names were Matthias Schmitz and Martin Kuyper, traitors to the end. They took Hannie to the dunes near Oversteegen, just outside Haarlem. The same dunes where hundreds of resistance fighters had already been executed and buried. Everyone in Holland knew about the dunes. If you were taken there, you weren't coming back. Hannie knew it. She'd been there before, in a way. She'd liquidated targets near there. She knew what happened in those dunes. Now it was her turn. They walked her into the sand at dawn, made her kneel. Her hands were tied behind her back. She was weak from torture, from starvation, from weeks in a dark cell. But she didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't cry. She knelt there in the sand and waited. Matthias Schmitz raised his pistol, aimed at the back of her head, fired. The bullet grazed her skull, wounded her badly, blood pouring down her face, but didn't kill her. She was still conscious, still alive. She fell forward, but didn't die. Schmitz panicked. He'd been point-blank range. How had he missed? He fired again, missed again. Or maybe he couldn't do it. Maybe at the last second, even a collaborator couldn't shoot an unarmed woman kneeling in the sand. We'll never know. Hannie was lying there, bleeding, wounded, dying, but not dead yet. She looked up at him, looked Schmitz right in the eyes, blood running down her face. And you know what she said? Her last words? "I shoot better than you." That was it. Not a plea for mercy, not a cry of pain, not begging for her life. A taunt. One final act of defiance. I shoot better than you. After everything they'd done to her, after all the torture, after they'd taken everything from her, she still had enough strength to insult her executioner, to spit in his face, to let him know that even at the end, even dying in the sand, she was better than him. Martin Kuyper raised his Sten gun, aimed at her head, and fired a burst, 5, 6 rounds, full automatic. Hannie Schaft died there in the dunes. 24 years old, 3 weeks before liberation, 3 weeks before the war ended, 3 weeks before she would have been free. They buried her in a shallow grave, so shallow that her red hair, her real red hair that had grown back in, was still visible above the sand. The girl with the red hair, dead at 24, May 5th, 1945. The Netherlands was liberated. The war in Europe was over. Germany surrendered unconditionally. Holland was free. Nazi soldiers marched away in defeat or into prisoner-of-war camps. Dutch flags flew again for the first time in 5 years. People danced in the streets, kissed strangers, cried with joy. It was over. The nightmare was over. Hannie Schaft had been dead for 18 days. She never saw it, never saw the liberation she died for, never saw the Dutch flag flying, never saw the Germans defeated. She gave everything, and she never got to see the world she died for. After the war, they searched the dunes, found 422 bodies buried there, 421 men, and 1 woman, the girl with the red hair. They identified her by her hair, by dental records, by the clothes she'd been wearing. They gave her a state funeral. Queen Wilhelmina, who'd fled to London but returned after liberation, called her the symbol of the resistance, a national hero, the bravest of the brave. They named streets after her, built monuments, wrote books, made films, made her into a legend, and she deserved it, every bit of it. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. Freddie and Truus Oversteegen, the 2 sisters who'd fought beside her, who'd liquidated just as many Nazis, who'd risked just as much, who'd done just as much to save Holland. They got nothing, not for decades. Why? Politics. Cold War politics. They were communists. Their whole family was communist, and during the Cold War, if you were a communist, you were forgotten, erased. It didn't matter what you'd done during the war. It didn't matter that you'd killed Nazis. It didn't matter that you'd saved lives. You were the wrong kind of hero, so you were ignored. Hannie got recognized immediately because she died. Martyrs are easy to honor. Dead heroes can't embarrass you, can't say anything politically inconvenient, can't have controversial opinions. They're perfect. But the ones who survived, the ones who had to live with what they'd done, the ones who carried the weight of their actions for decades, they got silence. Freddie and Truus waited almost 70 years before the Dutch government finally gave them military honors. 70 years. They were in their 90s. 70 years of being ignored by the country they saved. That's the reality. That's the truth nobody wants to talk about. Heroes don't always get parades. Sometimes they just get old and die in obscurity. But their actions, what they did, that matters. That lasts. Even if nobody remembers their names. Hannie's parents survived the concentration camp. Barely. They came home after liberation, broken, starving, traumatized. They learned their daughter was dead, executed 3 weeks before the end. 3 weeks. That's what haunted them for the rest of their lives. 3 weeks. If she'd just stayed hidden for 3 more weeks, if she hadn't taken that last mission, if she'd been just a little more careful at that checkpoint, 3 weeks and she'd have lived. But she didn't, and they had to live with that knowledge. Every year on April 17th, people in Holland visit the dunes. They leave flowers at the monument there. Red roses, always red, for the girl with the red hair. They remember what she did, what she sacrificed, what she gave up so they could be free. That's her legacy, not just the Nazis she killed, not just the missions she completed, but the example she set, the line she wouldn't cross, the humanity she refused to lose even in the darkest times. She killed, yes, she executed people, but she never killed children, she never lost herself. She stayed human while fighting monsters, and that's what made her a hero. Now, before we wrap this up, I want to say one more thing. If you've made it this far, if you've listened to this entire story, then you understand why these stories matter. We're losing them. The generation that lived through World War II, they're almost gone. In another 10, 20 years, there won't be anyone left who remembers. All we'll have are the stories. And if we don't tell them, if we don't preserve them, if we don't pass them on, then people like Hannie Schaft died for nothing. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Not for me, but for them. For Hannie and Freddie and Truus and all the others who fought and died and never got the recognition they deserved. Subscribe so these stories keep getting told. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your grandfather who fought in the war. Your father who's interested in history. Your friend who needs to understand what real courage looks like. Leave a comment telling me what you thought, what you learned, whether you'd heard of Hannie Schaft before. These interactions, they help the algorithm show this video to more people, which means more people learn, more people remember. That's how we keep these stories alive. That's how we honor their sacrifices. Hannie Schaft was 24 years old when she died. She should have become a lawyer, should have defended human rights in a courtroom, should have married, had children, lived a long, peaceful life. But she didn't get that. She got 3 years of hell, 3 years of killing and hiding and running and fighting, 3 years of looking over her shoulder, wondering if today was the day they'd catch her. And in the end, they did. 3 weeks before liberation, 3 weeks before she could have been free. But she doesn't have any regrets. She couldn't. Because she did what she believed was right. She fought back. She refused to bow down. She refused to let evil win without a fight. The Nazis thought they knew her, thought she was just another pretty girl, flirting, harmless, smiling and laughing in a bar full of German officers. They never saw the FN Browning pistol until it was too late. They never understood that the girl with the red hair was more dangerous than any soldier they'd ever faced, because she wasn't fighting for conquest or ideology or orders from high command. She was fighting for survival, for freedom, for the right to exist in her own country without fear. And she won. Not personally, no, she died. But Holland was liberated. The Jews she helped save, they lived. The families she protected, they survived. The children she smuggled across the border, they grew up free. She won. She just didn't live to see it. During World War II, thousands of people joined resistance movements across Europe. Most of them distributed pamphlets, hid refugees, passed information to Allied forces. Important work, absolutely. Essential work. But only a handful took up arms. Only a handful became fighters, assassins, executioners. And even fewer of those were women. Women who could seduce a Nazi officer and shoot him dead without hesitation. Women who could smile at a collaborator one moment and put a bullet in his brain the next. Women who could live with what they'd done and keep going, keep fighting, keep killing. Because it had to be done. Because someone had to do it. Hannie Schaft was one of them, and she was extraordinary, not because she was perfect, not because she was some superhero, but because she was human. She was scared, she was tired, she was heartbroken. But she kept going anyway. She chose to fight when she could have hidden. She chose to kill when she could have looked away. She chose to sacrifice when she could have saved herself. And she stayed human through all of it. She cried after every kill. She refused to murder children. She protected her friends even under torture. She carried the weight of what she'd done for every single day of her short life. That's what makes her a hero. Not the body count, not the missions, the sacrifice, the willingness to give everything, even her humanity, even her soul, for something bigger than herself. And she was just one person. One young woman with red hair and an FN Browning pistol. One law student who never got to practice law. One daughter whose parents were arrested because of her choices. One fighter who never saw liberation. But she mattered. Her actions mattered. Her story matters. Because it reminds us what ordinary people are capable of when they decide enough is enough. When they decide to stand up, to fight back, to refuse to let evil win without a fight. Hannie Schaft wasn't superhuman. She didn't have special training. Wasn't a soldier, wasn't an agent. She was a 20-year-old law student who had her future stolen by the Nazis, and she decided to do something about it. She picked up a gun and fought back. And for 3 years, she was one of the most effective, most feared resistance fighters in all of occupied Holland. She killed Nazis, she saved Jews, she inspired others to fight, and she died 3 weeks before she would have been free. The girl with the red hair, the most wanted, resistance fighter in occupied Holland, the woman who seduced Nazis and executed them in cold blood, the law student who became an assassin, the 24-year-old who died 3 weeks before liberation. That was Hannie Schaft. And we will never forget her. We can't afford to. Because her story isn't just about the past. It's about what happens when ordinary people face extraordinary evil. It's about the choices we make when everything is on the line. It's about staying human even when the world has become inhuman. That lesson is timeless. And as long as there are people willing to listen, as long as there are people willing to remember, Hannie Schaft will never truly die. She lives on in every person who refuses to look away from injustice, who refuses to stay silent in the face of evil, who refuses to let the monsters win. That's her legacy. That's what she left us. Not just a history lesson, but a reminder, a challenge. What would you do when everything you believed in is threatened, when your country is occupied, when your friends are being murdered? What would you do? Would you hide? Would you collaborate? Would you resist? And if you resisted, how far would you go? Those aren't easy questions. Hannie Schaft answered them. She went all the way, and it cost her everything. But she saved countless lives, and she refused to lose her humanity in the process. That's the example she set. That's the standard she left for the rest of us. And God help us if we ever have to live up to it.